You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome our friend, Aaron Zimmerman, Senior Director of Attorney Talent Acquisition at Morgan & Morgan. Aaron's a Harvard Law graduate, worked in big law, had a federal clerkship, and we're very excited to finally get to speak with him and have him share his story and what things are like at Morgan & Morgan. Aaron, thanks for coming on. Great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Very excited.
Yeah. And, just on behalf of Lawyer Stories, I want to thank you for your support. I know we met, we shared your story, and then a few months later, you were at our Boston event, which was a lot of fun. And then this couple weeks ago in New York City, we saw you, and you brought some Morgan & Morgan associates and some other people who work there. So thanks for your support. We really, here at Lawyer Stories, appreciate being able to team up with you and Morgan.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, the pleasure and privilege has been mine. I think, from the first time I heard one of your podcasts, I was like, I got to get involved here. I've loved everything, and it's exciting to be a part of it now. So thank you as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So just really brief, like where are you? So you currently live in DC. Where are you from?
So I grew up on the Jersey Shore until I was 10. Yep, Long Branch, New Jersey. And my parents then moved me and my sisters to Boca Raton, Florida. Grew up there until college, and then I was all over the Northeast for the next decade. And now I finally am situated in DC and intend to stay here for a while.
That's awesome. How young were you when you went to Boca?
I think it was going into fifth grade. I was like 10 in a couple months, maybe a few months, yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're in Boca, good area, familiar with it. So, so tell us about deciding to go to law school, and like, you went to Cornell, obviously, an Ivy League school, great school. When did you have that like moment? Did you have a moment about going to law school, or did you know when you wanted to do it? And did you know you wanted to go to such an amazing, institution like Harvard Law?
So it's a good question. I think the answer is kind of twofold. I grew up like addicted to Law and Order SVU.
Okay.
I think I've seen almost, if not every single episode that
Karen loves it too, by the way. So you guys should get together and. All right. So anyway, go ahead. So
yeah, no. I mean, there's a reason it is the longest running drama on TV. I think, right? There's like 26 seasons. I actually have the same birthday as Mariska Hargitay, which is my fun fact.
Okay. That's
So
awesome. There you go.
huge fan, loved it. I always was interested in law, and I thought it was something that I would likely consider pursuing. And then when I was in high school, I did the International Criminal Court, which was through my school's Model UN. And then when I got to Cornell, I think after the first semester of studying there and joining the mock trial team, which I then ended up being a part of for the next 4 years, I think at that point after the first semester, I was like, okay, I'm gonna lock and load. I'm
Wow.
gonna go pre-law, and the goal was always to get into the best law schools that I could and figure out which one would be best for me. So it was a pretty deliberate effort. I think this is a really interesting thing about law school admissions.
Mhm.
If you plan and prepare and focus on how you want to craft your admissions profile a lot earlier than other people who don't decide until later, you have
Mm.
a very distinct advantage. And I kind of tried to leverage that, and it worked
Really?
out okay. So
I think that's like super advice. And you did that by being on mock trial and that sort of thing.
it was a number of things. Mock trial was definitely one of them. I think, if you look at law school admissions, typically, not every school, but many, if not most schools, will really focus predominantly on two things. It's your LSAT score and your undergraduate GPA. There's, of course, other aspects to the profile. It's a holistic process overall, but those are two of the big ones. So I think if you really focus as a pre-law student, regardless of your major or where you're going to school, on just making sure you get the best grades you possibly can, it gives you a better insurance policy for whenever your LSAT comes around.
Right.
I knew I wasn't going to be like a superstar test taker relative to, those who can just walk in, not study that much, and get a 179 or 178.
Yeah.
I knew that was going to be my kryptonite in the process. So
Okay.
for me, it was all about making sure the GPA and the courses reflected, the best possible outcome. I studied abroad at Oxford for creative writing and English,
Wow.
and that was a pretty specific strategic move. I think I'm actually going to a wedding in a few weeks to be in the wedding party of one of my friends from
Oh,
Oxford
that's awesome.
a kid later. Yeah. So definitely like a very strategic, focused kind of path on my part from the time I got to college.
So from the time you got to college and like once you got in the mock trial, you're like, okay, like I need to shape my application to so they will see that I've really been kind of driven to do this since the day I got here to Cornell. So yeah, that I think a lot of people don't know to do that. Like, I mean, if they're not really sure, obviously they don't know to do that. So that's a really that's like great advice for anybody thinking about law school. And it seems like there was never any other option or path. I mean, if you were that early, like you were like, I really love this. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I kind of knew, like, I would say, you know, December of my freshman year of college, I was like, I'm going all in. And I was like, I was prepared to work in between if it didn't work out the way I wanted it to initially. I think that was also part of, how I chose my extracurriculars. I worked two jobs in college because
Wow.
I realized, yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I probably spent more time on extracurriculars than grades. I just kind of made sure to take classes that were going to be easier for me personally. I've always
Right.
been an English guy. I have never been a math guy or a
Yep.
science
Yep.
guy.
Yeah.
So I just kind of like, it's not my thing. So I kind of hummed in there. And then, a lot of certain law schools like Harvard, for example, tends to really enjoy receiving applications from people who have had at least 1 or 2 years of work experience, if not more. If you look at their stats and the number of people who are accepted without any work experience full time, it's very much the minority. And they oftentimes encourage deferrals, which is what I ended up doing. So I think kind of thinking ahead, I was like, oh, if I'm gonna apply senior year, I should probably show them that I'm not afraid to take on jobs in college as well. So that was kind of a deliberate choice in
So you
addition.
deferred a year after when you got in, you deferred the year and like just for 1 year and like works and had a job, work somewhere else.
Yeah, so that's actually it's kind of a wild just overall narrative. I mean, I basically was applying my senior year. I didn't know if I was going to get into, my top three choices, which were, Yale, Harvard, and Stanford. And I thought to myself, okay, shoot out job apps, apply to all of your schools,
Yeah.
and if you're not happy, then you can just try again because your LSAT's good for a certain number of years, and your GPA is obviously intact forever after that. So for me, I was like, let's see what happens. I ended up fortunately not getting into Yale, getting into Harvard and Stanford, and then got the job like to be a headhunter for trial lawyers and litigators about 3 days after my admission to Harvard Law School. And I
Oh,
kind of,
interesting. Okay.
yeah, so it like, it happened all in one fell swoop. I was like, oh wow, this is a really interesting opportunity. I don't know if I'm like ready to go to law school. I was ready to try to
Yep.
get in, but I kind
Yeah.
of I did. I was like, why not go learn the industry and get to talk to hundreds of lawyers for a year
Yeah.
while enjoying, what I think is arguably the best city on the planet, New York City, right?
Oh yeah.
So it was kind of a win-win. Harvard was very supportive of it. They often are, like I said, with deferrals. It was a really great opportunity for me to survey at the time what I thought was going to be my long-term corporate defense big law home. And I had a great time doing it. And I learned a lot about recruiting, and that led to, future things that we
Yeah, yeah.
will
So
talk
we're
about.
gonna get into. So like when you apply, do you have to tell them you want to defer, or is that I know you make the decision probably when you get accepted, but do you have to tell them like if I get in, I'm gonna defer this for a year, like sort of thing?
I remember in my case, I did not have to disclose
Okay.
that until after I was admitted. I think I requested it upon admission, but I also think that some applicants may mention that like proactively. And then also, certain law schools are starting to do programs. I think Harvard has, like for their undergrads or for certain, or not just them, for all undergrads, they have like a two
Yeah.
plus two program in the business school, and there's something similar. I think, don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure the law school kind of has, pre-deferral tracks for certain applicants.
So, what kind of jobs were you working at Cornell?
I was a tour guide, which is
Okay.
probably the best job that I've had
Okay.
aside from the current one. As a tour guide at Cornell, it's not just, they were technically called like information specialists,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
anything with like visitors, we did the
Right.
phone lines. You call Cornell asking for information, I pick up the phone, directing you to the right building. If you're transferring you to the admissions office, we did the traffic booths to welcome visitors and give them the parking permits. We're the only people authorized to give official campus tours.
Yep.
We did, what else was it? There was one other main function oh, the front desk at the visitor centers, right? So that was amazing because it was a bunch of people who were really social and extroverted.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a big job. And then I was also an RA for a good chunk of my college career.
That's sweet. So let me ask you this: when you got that letter from Harvard, and this is me, this is like my own personal like I don't want to call it a fixation, but I've always been very interested in like top law schools, and sort of like the things that happen there, and like sociology, and like the books that have come from there. Like for instance, like one of my favorite movies is a 1973 movie called The Paper Chase. And it's just an amazing. I actually, when Karen and I like first started dating, I think we watched The Paper Chase for like 2.5 hours. We're like, yeah, this movie's one of my favorite movies, and she wanted to watch it. I was like, all right. So, are you familiar with that at all? It's like it's this. Are
I've
you
heard
or
the
not?
name. I haven't
You've heard
seen
the
it.
name. All right, you've heard the name. All right. If okay, so when you got that letter in the mail from Harvard, like expecting like the acceptance, like what was that moment like?
It was actually a wild day for me. At the time, I think they're still doing this. When I was admitted, they actually called you
Oh,
first before you
cool.
got the
Okay.
written correspondence. And I think actually in a pretty bad mood that morning because I don't remember exactly why, but I just remember exactly where I was. I was working my tour guide job and I was running to grab a salmon avocado roll from,
Nice.
the pay per, diem
Oh yeah.
student dining situation. And because I'm a sushi addict and
Oh yeah.
I just was cranky. So I was like, I need to cheer myself up. I'm
There
gonna
you
go.
go.
Right. So I'm in the really busy School of Hotel Administration at Cornell and I'm just kind of traversing the hallways. I get this phone call from a random number. I was like, oh, geez, someone's calling me. I'm going to be late to my shift. And the admissions officer, when I answered, was like, hey, is this Aaron? This is, so and so from Harvard Law School.
Man.
And I kind of lost my mind. Like, she actually asked me if I was okay because she's like, are you alone? I was like, no, I'm good. I'm with people. She's
You
like,
lost your mind? How so?
she just thought that I was like stuttering and stumbling over my
Okay,
words.
yeah.
Like I was so taken aback by it because it was
Yeah.
something that I had dreamed of and that I had hoped would happen for so long. And it was the first of, I was, like I said, aiming for Harvard, Yale, or Stanford, and Harvard was the first one before Stanford. And it just kind of, I don't know how to articulate it really. It's a surreal moment
Yeah,
where
yeah. I'm like welling up a little bit thinking about it, man. Like I think I saw a TikTok about them calling actually and like contacting the student. I mean, that's a great way to do it. They should do that.
It's great, and I think I actually recently saw a video as well that they put out, and I loved how they did it. It's a once in a lifetime kind of phone call,
Yep.
and I was very grateful because, candidly, like my LSAT was nothing to sneeze at by Harvard law standards, right? I was really not sure if I was going to get in. I thought maybe I had a chance of getting in the second time around, because my GPA was really strong for them, but my LSAT was at the time probably dead median and now is probably below median.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was like, oh my God, I actually did it. Like everything I kind of cushioned the previous few years has
Right.
now helped me get here. And like I just felt like, um, I had done what I had set out to do,
Yeah.
and that's a
I mean,
really good feeling.
yeah. To me, I mean, they probably. I mean, what do I know? But it seems like they probably saw the path, like the path that you had created for yourself, and really analyze that. And I think that's a tremendous. I think that's really cool. So you get to Harvard Law. Tell me what that experience was like at Harvard, and specifically, one thing that was like my biggest thing that I just did not like in law school at all, and I think it actually hindered my learning a little bit, was the Socratic method. Tell me a little bit about like going to Harvard Law School and that sort of thing, and
Yeah, there's a lot to say for sure. I think. For one, basically you and almost everyone around you has some kind of imposter syndrome or a degree
Yeah.
of feeling like they should not be there. And those who don't are typically not those that I would like to socialize with on the weekends. Let's put it that way, right?
Okay. All right.
Everyone is extremely hardworking and bright and smart and interesting and has a lot of different world background experiences that it's a very, diverse series of perspectives. And I think when you're surrounded by a group of, 80 people all enduring the Socratic method, like to your point, and you hear others speak and how articulate and
Yeah.
incredibly analytical they are and just how comfortable they are addressing things that sometimes were like going way over my head, I was like, oh my God, I like don't even want to think about these law school exams coming. Like, how am I supposed to compete with these people?
Right.
They're amazing. And 1L, I think in that way is it's the case at every law school, right? It's 1L is the hardest, it's the toughest, your grades matter the most for potential subsequent employment opportunities.
Right.
Not really as 2L and 3L is where you have more fun and get to actually take the classes you want to take, and you're not
Yep.
doing the block letter. So that was a very tough chapter for me. I definitely, I think I was, around the middle of the pack by the end of 1 year, and I was ecstatic when I found that out.
That's
I did
pretty
not
cool.
do well, relatively speaking, as I wanted to do in my fall grades because not because I didn't know the material, but because I think I let my anxiety get the best of
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
and I kind of cracked under the pressure. And then spring, and we can talk about this a bit later. I kind of had a traumatic family event where my aunt, who had been battling mesothelioma, passed away about 3 days before
Wow.
my 1L exams in the spring. And so it really changed my emotional and mental mindset. I
Okay.
went from like speaking at her funeral in front of hundreds of people to opening my criminal law textbook. And I was like, I just don't care what happens. I'm going to do my best and whatever it is, it is. And then because the anxiety was gone, because I was just so over it, I actually did substantially better.
Wow.
So that, was a really interesting kind of exercise and experience, just learning about myself in that way and how I perform, what drives me to do well, how I actually execute it, what my stumbling blocks are. So that was a very transformative, I think, internal experience, right? I think beyond 1L, what's amazing in particular at Harvard are the clinical opportunities.
Mm.
You actually really get to practice even as a law student if you want to. I
Yep.
was
Yep.
doing it even actually in part in 1L. I joined a group called Harvard Defenders, which I very much support, and I'm so happy that
That's
I
awesome.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really glad that I got that exposure. Um, Under Rule 303 in Massachusetts, you're permitted to practice under supervision of a licensed attorney. So we were, appearing at show cause hearings, which is a unique part of the state level system that, frankly, I think every state should adopt. It allows an opportunity for criminal defendants to basically divert arraignment and instead have a continuance where, if they honor the terms of the agreement that the court signs, then their charge that they had that may be kind of nebulous, or maybe it's pretty solid, but not necessarily going to be beyond reasonable doubt.
Hmm.
If they can kind of reform on their own, it allows them to wipe the charge, or they'll just dismiss it outright. And
Wow.
so, as student advocates, were helping those defendants kind of navigate that process.
Okay.
That was awesome. And, when you're speaking as a 1L in front of a
Yep.
judge, you're like,
Right. Yeah.
again,
That's
extremely nervous, but also
crazy.
like
Yeah.
you're doing the thing for the first time and you got to start somewhere.
Right.
The Criminal Justice Institute, similarly, was something I did in my 3L, and that's kind of a more advanced, kind of full on clinical that you get instead of actual like classes. You get credits for, again, participating in the criminal justice system. More so at the arraignment level and beyond. You can even go to trial as a 3L if your case happens to do that.
That's
Um,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah, on the civil side, I was not a part of this org, but I wish I were. The Harvard Legal Aid Bureau allows students to basically run a pro bono civil side law firm and do fully fledged trials
Wow.
under Rule 3032. And, those are the kinds of applicants and law students who I would kill to have at Morgan& Morgan because they're doing the thing that they, are going to be doing for the rest of their lives before they
Right.
graduate. And it takes a very special kind of person not only to be admitted to that program, to have empathy and an understanding of how to navigate difficult civil client, oftentimes, if not exclusively indigent clients, to navigate their very challenging issues with them, but then also
Right.
to forego a lot of their academic curriculum in exchange for this very like clinical, practical opportunity. So that was something that at Harvard I was amazed at. I mean, I think I did 4 clinics over my time there. I
Yeah.
loved each and every one of them for different reasons. I think the size of the school affords a lot of different opportunities, as well
Mhm.
as, of course, the network, right? Like there's a lot of
Sure. Yeah.
Harvard Law grads and now in places that allow us to make connections as law students with those people and even intern for them or extern for them. So in that regard, Harvard was awesome. That's the
Wow.
probably
Wow.
the highlight.
So, and did you get recruited like by Skadden? Like when you were at Harvard, like were you looking for like defense firms? Like how did that all come about? Your first job
Yeah,
out of Harvard?
yeah, that's a definitely a longer answer, but I'll try to give you the short version. I think when I was a headhunter previously in my deferral year,
Yep.
I was very deliberate about speaking to multiple attorneys in different practice areas from different law firms. And I will say, even though my heart is, not with the defense, and is, perpetually going to be with the plaintiff side at the
Yep.
time, at that age, I was definitely interested in starting my career in big law, and I felt like Skadden culturally felt fitting based on all the lawyers that I had met. And then I networked a lot among a bunch of different big law firms my 1L
Okay.
year and explored multiple markets. I think I must have interviewed at over 30 law firms, and I think I ended up with somewhere around 15 offers in
Wow.
total nationwide. And at the end of the day, Skadden just felt like the right fit after meeting with various partners and associates. And also, I decided to go there over other law firms because between the time that I had started networking and then after my aunt's death, when I got the offer, I realized that being able to silo my practice in a way that I could at Skadden would
Hmm.
be very valuable, no matter what I decided to do, whether that was stay at Skadden forever or even, is, I knew I was clerking, right? So
Right.
clerk and then go back to Skadden or clerk and then do something else. I appreciated that kind of method and model. And coincidentally, Morgan& Morgan actually also silos its practice areas. And for me, that was like a really strong appeal aside from just the people being awesome and super cool and my
When you
speed.
say silo practice area, can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, if you look at a different law firm, big law firm X, right?
Hmm.
They might have a generalist system. So you would go into the litigation group, but that could be civil lit. Then the next day you're doing white collar defense. Then the next day you're working on, mass torts. At
Wow.
Skadden, I was in the mass torts group, so that's all we were doing. I was not doing
Okay.
commercial civil lit. I was not doing anything other than like that particular narrow area within law or litigation, I should say. And I like that for me, especially because I knew I would be going to clerk where I would be learning about all different kinds of lawsuits because
Right.
clerking, you necessarily have to draft the order on whatever kind of case it is. You don't have any say in that. It's whatever the docket is and whoever files the lawsuit. So for
Right.
me to get the concentrated exposure before that was super, exciting to me.
Okay. So you were there, Skadden for a year. Was it a year, Aaron?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what was it like? I mean, were you working like 100, like millions of hours a week? Like how,
Um,
like did they roll the snack cart by like at dinner time? Like what was the?
I definitely enjoyed the dinner policy. That is for sure. If you build a certain number of hours, you were allowed to, Uber Eats dinner to the office, which I loved. And they had a brand new office and still have it in Hudson Yards, and it's a gorgeous view. So it's a lot, more enjoyable when you've got a beautiful view of
Yeah.
the river and just being in a nice work environment, I think makes a difference. I wouldn't say I build like a I would not say that I build a crazy amount. In fact, I probably ended up underbilling relative to how I'm
Yeah.
sure the firm would have preferred. I think part of that was probably because they knew that I would be clerking and leaving, so it made more sense from a short-term standpoint to, maybe afford a different associate a little bit more focus on a specific matter with a partner, knowing that that attorney would necessarily be there for at least a couple years more,
Oh, so
right?
did you went in there knowing you'd be there for a year and then went to clerk? Is that what the deal
Correct.
was?
And I,
Okay.
yeah,
All
and
right.
I made that clear to Skadden beforehand, and they not only did not have a problem with it, but they also encourage it oftentimes because if you look at clerking and the model of all the big law firms, kind of want their associates to clerk and then hope that they'll come back and actually give them a clerkship bonus to make up for the difference in income. Because when you're a
Wow.
federal employee, right, you're not making private
That's
sector.
crazy. So do you have to do that with the like agreement that you will come back?
No, it's kind of like you get the clerkship, we hope you do. If you do come back, you get a bonus at the rate that the firm has decided. And then with other law firms, sometimes if you join after the clerkship, they'll give you the bonus in parts, and you get part A after 1 year, and then to get the full amount, if it's like an above market clerkship bonus, you have to do the full 2 years. So it really just depends on, the firm in terms of where you go from your clerkship, but there's never a binding agreement that you have to,
Yeah.
make sure you come back if you
It just
accept.
it seems like that's kind of cool because you're going there for a year, maybe you're getting like trained, you're like learning the system and learning like whatever they're doing, getting like confidential information, privacy, and then you're going to like you're going to go clerk after a year without the guarantee that you're coming back. So that's kind of I think I guess it's kind of a good deal, right?
I thought it was amazing. I mean, for me, it was like I could go into because everyone talks about like Big Law being crazy and wild, right? And you're building
Yeah.
things off and you have no life and it's, just constant craziness. And so hearing all those horror stories that I had heard from many attorneys when I was headhunting and even when I was a law student, I was like, ooh, yikes, like I don't know if I'm like ready for that life, right?
Right,
For a
right.
long time. So going in knowing that I had that clerkship and that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how the experience went, was like very reassuring. Uh,
Right.
and I think that made it more enjoyable and kind of less stressful, even in moments where I was working a lot of hours or when I was, conversely, like when I was doing really cool things, right? Like I got to help prepare an expert witness for a deposition as a first year. That was a one-time thing, but I flew to Boston and worked with the counsel and the partner on it, and I was like, oh my God, this is so cool, right? So it was more of like a let's just enjoy this ride and then I'll figure out what I want to do.
Yeah. And so then you went into a federal clerkship. Tell us a little bit about that, and then I want to hear about the transition over to like what you're currently doing.
Yeah, I clerked for someone who I think is one of the best human beings of all time. His name is, I'll say the Honorable Paul G. Byron, but he probably would want me to just say Paul or, Judge Byron. He is still to this day my mentor. I talk to him all the time. You would never know that he's a federal judge who is a former AUSA of a decade of 10 or of a decade and a former Yugoslavia War Tribunal
Wow.
prosecutor, someone who, really excelled in the private sector on the plaintiff side and products liability. Like he's really just a, you know, legal prodigy in many ways, right? And at the same time, you have a conversation with him, and it's just like talking to, any cool guy you're just grabbing a drink with or grabbing coffee
Right.
with. Like he's so down to earth relative to who he is on paper, and I was immediately excited about that when I interviewed with him for the first time. I got really lucky that a former one of his clerks was someone who kind of knew me socially from school. So when I sent in my application, I got flagged because he knew the person. And
Yep.
then, before I know it, I had a clerkship offer after we actually FaceTimed, right? Because the Zoom link wasn't working. And,
That's awesome.
I think that speaks to, right, Judge
Yep.
Barron's of just being like super down to earth. And he was like, oh, this isn't working. No worries. I'll just FaceTime you. And
Yep.
I'm sitting there like freaking out, being like, oh my God, I'm missing my interview with a federal judge. And he's just like, oh, hey, how's it going? And,
Huh.
an hour later, right, like I, have a clerkship offer and it's
Yeah.
a
It's
crazy
awesome.
thing. And the clerkship itself was unbelievable in the sense that, not only did I love the people that I was working with, especially Judge Byron himself, we would, socialize for hours on a given day, right? In tandem with making sure the docket's in order and drafting the orders and keeping everything, up to snuff. But when you're clerking, you're getting a lot more substantive responsibility. Like you go from being the junior associate that does the research memo for the mid-level, who prepares the dispositive motion for the partner, who sends back edits, who then submits it to the court, to being the person who literally decides on the law after
Yeah,
receiving the.
that's crazy, right? Like you're deciding you're that's wild.
It was very wild and very intimidating at times. Fortunately, Judge Barron, in his typical fashion, was always, happy to answer questions and of course, reviewed every single order before I would present it to him. But you basically, and we would have a lot of live dialogue about how we think the law should come out based on, different precedents. So it was a very iterative process, but
Wow.
also very
That's
autonomous.
what incredible experience to be able to like have those discussions and
Just
about
hearing how he thought
precedent
was
and
amazing. Yeah,
what's that? Yeah.
just hearing how he thought was amazing, right? Like
Yeah.
being like, oh wow, like something that would take me 20 hours takes you two,
Yeah.
and this is how you got there, and then you develop your brain because you learn directly from someone who is a guru, right? And I think you know, to be able to receive briefs from partners at firms like Skadden and then to review both sides and be like, okay, this is how I think it should come out based on all the legal research I've just done for the last 5 hours.
Right.
There's a fatal flaw in this brief, right? You just learn a lot more
Wow.
quickly. So you kind of, really develop and sharpen your legal skills if you do want to be a brief writer, or you want to observe trials all the time. Like, frankly, I'm the kind of person who, if I were still litigating, would probably enjoy the discovery more. Not that I don't enjoy, brief writing,
Okay.
but I loved, prepping for that depot.
Yep.
I love, sitting down and being like, okay, here's all the evidence. These are all the questions we have to ask. Let's make this witness feel like, we're really just two pals having a good time. And then you get more sometimes with honey than with
Right. That's right.
vinegar. And the next thing you know, the transcript reflects exactly what you need in case you have to impeach that witness at trial a year and a half later, right? And part of what I like about what I do now is that I'm constantly interacting with trial attorneys or aspiring
Right.
trial attorneys. And that's really what I thought I wanted to be, was the person who would be taking the depots and prepping for every case as though we were taking it to trial. And that's what Morgan and Morgan does as a firm. So for me, the clerkship was an awesome pretext for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, how does that? So that helps you in your day to day now with like working with the attorneys, and how does that really help? Like being a recruiter, talking to recruiting plaintiff side trial attorneys.
Yeah, I think it helps in a few ways. I think that, attorneys oftentimes, if they're dealing with a recruiter or any kind of service provider, they want to feel like the person on the other end speaks their language, right? And as
Right.
someone who has done the thing that they do, not in the sense that I've tried cases myself, but I've sat in the clerk's box watching two of our best trial attorneys at Morgan and Morgan try a case in front of my judge and seeing how that entire process unfurled. Like, I can speak to that from firsthand
Right.
knowledge
Right.
I've observed and what I've done in terms of my own career. And then I think also, just from a substantive standpoint, if you're, recruiting, I say to a lot of people that recruiting is like being a poker player. I think if you're a world-class recruiter, um, it's like being professional, right, at the table, because you can do everything right. You can have pocket aces. You can really make sure you're thorough. You're reading the room. You're checking all the different angles. And if the river comes out in an unexpected way, or there's something that you just couldn't have anticipated, you're not going to bat 100 out of 100. You're going to lose that round of poker, right?
Right. Right.
It is with recruiting. Fortunately, I feel very good about the overall quality of people that I've brought to Morgan and Morgan, and it's an absolute privilege to have done so and to continue to do so. But I think, as a recruiter, it's really important to not only make sure someone is a culture fit and that they're going to get along with
Right. That's right.
your colleagues and their future colleagues in the specific office, but also that they have these substantive skills to actually be able to do what needs to be done. We take that very seriously as a firm. You have to
Yeah.
be very, very ready to advocate for your clients in every case. And I think, as a former attorney, when I'm recruiting, I can ask people about specific things on their resume that someone who has not done what I've done professionally wouldn't have the wherewithal to even necessarily think about or understand. So you're kind of like an agent for, a language that you've used to speak fluently, right? Or at least were
Yeah.
learning
Yeah.
to speak fluently. So for
Yeah.
me, that's cool.
That's amazing. And so I guess I'm curious, like going back to like going the time between undergrad and law school, how you, well, that's when you did recruiting, right?
Mhm.
Did the year of recruiting. And then how did you kind of go from saying, okay, I have this clerkship, I'm going to go, now I'm going to go to recruiting. Like, how did you How did you get into it? How did they find you? I mean, they got a really obviously a really good a really good person in that position. Somebody who actually who knows like everything that the attorneys need to know that are coming to you. So that's fantastic for Morgan and Morgan. So how did you end up there, basically?
Yeah, it was definitely a really interesting turn of events. If you had told me that I would be just having turned 30 years old, living in Washington, D.C., and not practicing law, I would have told you were crazy 5 years ago, right?
Yeah,
But, things happen, and my dad always says, man plans and God laughs, and I think that's really what happened here. It was definitely a series of different events. Obviously, clerking for Judge Byron in Orlando, Florida, which is where Morgan and Morgan started originally
right.
37 years ago, I believe. I learned a lot about the firm's growth by seeing, those attorneys that I mentioned before trying that case, and by,
Mhm.
speaking with Judge Byron, who has seen the firm develop. I mean, he remembers the firm when it was before it was Morgan and Morgan, right? I mean, when they
Yeah,
just started. So
right.
he gave me a lot of intel and perspective as to how successful the firm has, maintained its growth, or successfully, I should say, it's maintained its growth and just what we've become. I mean, he knows it from day one, basically, or around that time. And now we're a firm that has recovered um, $25 billion and counting in the past 37 years, and 8 billion of that was in the last 2 years alone,
Wow.
if not more, right? We're present in all 50 states and DC. We, have gone from an Orlando shop to dominating Florida, and then we moved into Georgia, and now
Yeah,
it's,
yeah, it's everywhere. I know. I mean, we've had people on our podcast that have at some point been an attorney at Morgan Morgan. I can think of two of them that went off to start their own firms.
Hmm.
But so like, tell me like more like about the decision after doing, and it's different. I mean, I work a job that's not a legal like my agency pays for like my mass bar and like I'm licensed in 3 states and I try to keep those up. But like you were obviously like a practitioner, like a craftsman in like the legal world, and learning all this stuff, and then you could have easily gone back to a firm. So like, what was the draw with Morgan and Morgan?
Yeah, and in fact, I had an offer to join a firm off a clerkship bonus, and I ended up turning it down, and I'm extremely happy that I did,
Yeah,
because after learning about the firm from Judge Byron, and also, through witnessing the kind of work that the firm does on a daily basis from the clerk's box, I also was connected to one of the leaders at the firm at the time. And when I just coincidentally through, a family connection, right? Like I was just having lunch with my dad and my dad's friend, and I was telling about my headhunting background and, my time in law school because his son was coincidentally going to Harvard Law and then also to Stanford Business. After I had finished,
you
genius
don't
guy.
mess around, man, huh? With these
Dude,
people you're hanging out with. All right.
that guy makes me look like the dumbest person
Yeah,
in the room
right.
every time. I mean, he is a prodigy, right? And so is his father, right? And so when I was telling his dad, who's a former class action attorney, who did very well for himself, just kind of my background, and that I really loved headhunting when I was doing it. I
Yeah.
loved recruiting. It was super fun. I worked for the career services office at Harvard Law, and loved, mentoring law students about their career prospects. He was like, you know what, you should talk to Morgan and Morgan because they're growing like crazy and they might have a really interesting, opportunity for you, whether it's becoming a trial attorney or even maybe being a part of the business side in some capacity. And I was like, yeah, like why not? Why wouldn't I want to talk to someone super high up at an amazing
Yeah,
firm? Of
that's amazing. Yeah.
course, I'll have a conversation.
Yeah.
So one thing led to the next, and there's Zoom interviews, and then flying out to New York to meet in person. And at a certain point, when the firm offered me a trial attorney position, I kind of, after having a series of discussions, I was like, wait a minute, you guys are probably going to need
Wait.
hundreds.
So were they when they were flying you out? Were they interviewing to be a trial attorney, or were they interviewing to be like a recruiter, or were they
It
just
wasn't
trying to
clear.
get to know Aaron? Like,
Yeah, it was let's get to know each other.
okay,
This is because it was, the person that I had mentioned, the class action attorney, he had connected us and spoke highly to
okay,
one another of, just so we were, kind of exploring how I could be best fitting at Morgan and Morgan if I were to join at all. And it got to a point where I learned about the growth and all the attorneys that we were going to need in the coming years. And I was like, wait a minute. Um, I I understand that you more likely would think that you would want me as a trial attorney because that's who you guys are. You're a
Right,
trial
right.
law firm, right? You work for the people. We tried more cases than any firm in the country last year, I believe, 320 trials. That number is slated to rise to 500 in the coming years.
Wow.
So, the natural instinct is talking to someone with my background, like, oh, yeah, he could be a good trial lawyer for us. But I was like, wait a minute, if you need all those trial attorneys and I can get you them, and I think that I'm able to, wouldn't you rather have 100 trial lawyers who can do the job better than I can or ever will instead of just me as a lawyer? And there were, the firm, I think, of course, I don't know what conversations ensued when I was not in the room when I was interviewing, but I think there was surely internal conversation about it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we ended up, crafting an arrangement that made sense for me to join as a recruiter, right?
And
And that's how.
basically, did they basically like develop the position for you? Like title
Yeah,
and
I think
stuff?
it's
I
fair to
mean,
say that. I
yeah.
think it's fair to say that.
Wow.
There's a pretty
Wow,
good.
they scored, man. They scored big. That's incredible. And
I
because,
scored big too.
well, yeah, for sure. I mean, it seems like a great fit. I mean, because you can really talk to these people that you're recruiting. I mean, you can really get to know them. I mean, you can connect with them because, you've been through the law school process and like you've been a litigator, you've done it all at the highest level. So I mean, when you're meeting somebody, you really will bring them, the best attorneys, right?
I like to think so, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully, I think, on the note of like connecting with people, I'm able to do it not only because of my past experiences, but because I believe in what I'm, sharing, right? I believe in the work that the firm does on a daily basis.
Right.
I wake up every morning, thinking about when I talk to candidates, what happened with my aunt and what the justice system looked like for her on the civil side
Mhm.
as far as that case, went. And I think about the work that we do for our clients and the people's lives who are changed after they have experienced some of the worst, most grievous moments of their
Right.
lives. And we as a firm, our business, our core function is very simple and straightforward. It's literally help people get civil justice for what they deserve and do not let them get taken advantage of by the insurance companies and make sure that we can offer recompense by representing them the best way we can and to be able to be a person who is helping to amplify that because every attorney I bring on will hopefully eventually help hundreds and hundreds of people, themselves on
Yeah.
behalf of the firm. To me, that's a win. So it makes it
Yeah,
easy
no,
to
that's
sell something you really care about.
no, that's great. You can definitely hear the passion in your voice. So what does Morgan and Morgan look for when it's hiring attorneys? Like, what's a good fit?
I think a good fit is holistically, across the board, someone who we think is an A plus, right? And that can mean a lot of different things, and different offices might have different needs at specific times. But
Okay.
I think a really good combination is a high degree of empathy and EQ and sociability, and also a type A personality that is going to be detail oriented, that is going to be relentless for all of our clients, no matter how big or how small the case is, who's always looking to go above and beyond on the substantive stuff, but then also someone you want to hang out with on the weekends, right? Like
Yeah.
usually some people will have one or the other, right? We want people who have both.
Yeah.
And we want people who care. I think that's the best way I can say it. I think, not I think, I remember going up to John Morgan after one of our nationwide conferences that we were hosting. Attorneys from all over the country come
Mhm.
to, hear John Morgan speak and Matt Morgan and Keith Mitnick are,
Mhm.
one of our most celebrated trial attorneys of all time. And it's a really exciting event. And I had met John before, but I wanted to make sure I could go up to him and ask him what I did, which was, John, I'm going to be trying to get you the talent that you want for your firm for the next, X many years, hopefully in
That's
perpetuity.
awesome.
What do you want, right? What can I do for you? And he
Right.
said, and John Morgan is one of the best public speakers I have ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And if he wants to say something succinctly, he's going to say it succinctly. And if he wants to say something in many words, he'll do it in many words. He looked me in the eye. I will never forget this moment. He said, people who care,
I
right?
love
And it
it.
was kind of like this light bulb for me, not because I didn't already know that we want, of course, caring attorneys, but it just kind of reminded me in real time why John Morgan started his firm, right? What the reason was, which
Yeah.
is, very publicly, it's known that John was not satisfied with the representation that his brother was afforded and
Right.
wanted to create an institution where that would not happen again. And in order to do that, and for us to continue to do that, you have to care. And I can tell when someone doesn't care many times, not always, but I
Yeah.
can
No,
usually
I mean, look, I've heard him speak. I've heard the story. I mean, I worked with one of the marketing companies that you guys work with. I went out to one of their events, and I mean, I don't think he was there, but I've heard him speak. I can tell you about that after, but so I've definitely heard like his story about that. That was that almost reminds me of like when Tom Brady went up to Bob Kraft and was like, "Just you've just made the best. You just made the best pick possible, putting me on this team or whatever it was." You know,
I would never ever compare myself to Tom Brady for a
I
million
know,
reasons.
but it's
I
just kind of
very much
my
appreciate that.
excuse me,
Um,
sir. You just I will not let you down. You just made the best pick possible. But yeah,
and
no,
I and
that's great. I
I,
love that you went up to him. People who care. That's perfect. I mean, he's lived it. He's lived the whole situation. His story is compelling.
For sure. And I think it's, it's also nice because I think it's easily, and I said this at your event, right? And I'll just say it again for anyone who's listening who wasn't there. I think, you know, Morgan and Morgan offers the combination of the following three things. And if you want these three things and you want to make sure you getting all of them and a balance of all of them, I cannot think of a better law firm in the world. And that's actually getting to try cases, helping people every single day. Like your job is literally to help people,
Yep.
and you get to earn a, great living for yourself in the process of doing so. And it's directly correlated to how well you do for your clients, right? Like if that's what you're looking for, we are the Yankees or the Patriots, right? To
That's
go back to
awesome.
Tom
Yeah.
Brady of the
Not
industry.
anymore, but
And
yeah, no,
yeah.
that's amazing. So, do you look at schools? Like, do you look at the schools that they're coming from, or do you look at sort of like the full picture? Like, I'm asking about like the law school, like,
Yeah. I mean, we look at everything, right?
okay,
I would say law school is definitely a piece of the puzzle, right?
okay,
And I think, certain partners might have, just like in any law firm, right? I shouldn't even say partners. I should say every law firm has their own set of criteria when they look at a candidate. For example, some big law corporate defense firms will not interview you if you do not come from a certain ranked school. Other big law firms, and Skadden, was included among this, at least when I was there, they'll take someone who is top three in their class in their law school from a lower ranked law school over
yep,
someone who went to, Stanford but was at the bottom or, close to the bottom of their class if the former person is more of a culture fit and
right,
seems like they're going to excel among the lawyers already there. We look at everything. I want to know, where did you go to school? That is important for sure, and will probably continue to become more and more important at the junior levels as we continue to grow. I look at, how do I feel like you'll interact with the attorneys that I know in the local office, and especially our managing
right,
partners? Are you going to be someone who is going to leverage your past mock trial experience and the awards that you won in X competition? Are you someone who went out of their way to go work for the district attorney's office so that you can get in court before you were, a graduate? Like
right, right.
it's a very case by case specific inquiry, and I
Okay,
wouldn't say there's a formula, but we
that's
do
fair.
have
That's fair.
trends for sure.
That's fair. So, where do you think the legal talent landscape has changed, and like where do you think it's headed?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately for us, right, there's been a dramatic shift toward the plaintiffs bar, and we exclusively represent the people, right? That's our motto, for the people. We don't
Yep.
represent, corporate defendant clients. If you look at the big law statistics in the past decade, right, like, and also look at the law schools starting their own plaintiff societies, right? Like when I was at Harvard Law, there was barely a plaintiff society. Now it's like 5x the size. They're doing
That's
sponsorships.
crazy.
I actually recently spoke on a panel there, which was a whole
Nice.
full circle moment, right? Like there is this new wave of law students who are like, wait a minute, I don't want to go work for the corporations just so I can feel like I'm getting guaranteed income my first year out of school or guaranteed, something on my resume to show that I went to X firm, right? Like there was really a changing tide toward the plaintiffs bar, toward going to straight to the government, and that's a great thing, right? And that's a great thing for us because we want the best and the brightest and the most talented future trial attorneys.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people and law students are starting to realize that there's more than one path out of law school. It's not what the law schools used to push as the option you had to do, which was the corporate defense firm. Now it's, wait a minute, I can go try cases in my third year at Morgan and
Yep.
Morgan before I take a deposition in my sixth year. That's going to appeal to a lot of people, and it's trending that way. So that for
Yep.
me is, a dream, right? That's exactly what you want as
Yeah.
someone
No,
who's
that's
talent.
incredible. So what advice would you give to law students interested in becoming trial attorneys?
Oh, that's a good one. Oof, there's a few things. I mean, I think definitely make sure it's for you, right? Like do the extracurriculars that are going to get you the opportunities that you should have, right? You try mock trial, try moot court. I think maybe go to the DA's office by way of example for an internship, or even more ideally, come to our summer program, right? And see if trial law is something that you think you can see yourself doing, not just from how it looks on the outside, but actually when you're like literally sitting in the
Yep.
courtroom, right? All of our summer associates this past year, I believe, um, were attended at least one trial throughout the summer program,
Yep.
right? So they actually got to be in the courtroom watching our attorneys at the trial level do their thing so that
Okay.
they can gain exposure to seeing what it literally looks like in real time. I think any chance you can get to have those moments and those experiences are going to validate whether you want to be a trial attorney. So do that. I think don't prioritize the short term over the long term goal. If you do, in fact, think, yes, for sure, I want to be a trial lawyer, don't go to a place where you think you have to go because that's what your peers are doing if it's not going to lead to the trial path you want. Because it's really
Right.
hard to get trial experience, right?
Yeah.
Especially if
Totally.
you're at the corporate level, you're not trying the case and you're probably not even getting to attend trial for years,
Right.
right? Because the
True.
corporate clients are going to settle those cases before they even get close to trial. Barring a few exceptions, of course, right? But predominantly, that's kind of what we're looking at. I think they should definitely, you know, figure out what kind of subject matter they're interested in, right? If you want to be a criminal, if you want to be a trial attorney and you don't care what kind of subject matter it is, yeah, there's value to maybe going to be a public defender because you're going to get a frequency of trials and it's all exclusively criminal. But a lot of people don't want to ever touch criminal law.
Right. It's
Right?
true.
So I think you got
Yeah.
to know what's interesting to me. What do I want to, if I'm working late hours on a trial, because you and I both know trials can be rigorous, right? Like you want to make
Yeah.
sure
Oh yeah.
you're enjoying it and you
Right.
want to make sure it's cool and fun for you. So for me, like I love torts, right? That's why I'm part of why I'm at Morgan and Morgan,
Yeah.
right? I've always thought it's super interesting. I also love crim law, but torts is like was super fun for me. My professor
Yeah.
Goldberg, at the time, my 1L year was just like an all-star, and he's amazing, and he's a former Supreme Court clerk, and just
Right.
made torts like super fun. So figure out the subject matter. That's another one, and then finally, like just have a long-term plan, just like anything
Yeah.
else.
No, I know you got to
Maybe.
plan. A lot of people don't plan. I want to go back to something that you said about like to do with your aunt. Like you tied it. You went over it very quickly, and I really wanted to get your opinion on it. Like about imposter syndrome and like your aunt. You said something there like it kind of like helped you break the mold somehow
Yeah,
and like be able to speak. Or can you share a little bit about that? Like what happened there?
yeah,
Um, because I think that's I think imposter syndrome is like a big thing. Like I think a lot of us deal with it. I mean, I don't, no matter where it comes from. I mean, I know every time before I have an event, I deal with it literally. Like I'll talk to Neil about it, like, and I'll just like be like, what am I doing here? You know, because I'm sitting in Central Mass with my job, which I really like, and then all of a sudden I'm in this like big city and I've invited like 100 something attorneys to come, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? You know, because the
yeah, for
process
sure.
was fun for me, but then I get a little like overwhelmed. So I don't tell me a little bit about like that experience, as much as whatever you want to share about it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I totally get it, and it's definitely. permeated for me beyond just my 1L year, right? Like even when I was speaking at your event in New
Yeah.
York, I didn't even think about it. And then all of a sudden, when, I got up to speak, all of a sudden my heart's pounding, right?
Yep.
And hopefully it didn't come off that way to the outside crowd, but in my head, I was, oh my God, like I'm speaking in front of so many people.
Yeah.
And I think, that's how it kind of was with the law school exams, where part of the reason why I would have that imposter syndrome and feel so anxious because at the time it felt like everything was riding on that. And that was going to determine the rest of my life. And it was, of the utmost importance for me to get
Right.
X, Y, and Z grade. Otherwise, I would not have this opportunity and I couldn't go to that law firm, blah, blah, blah. And I just let the weight of it kind of overwhelm me. And it made me, not able to perform under the pressure when it was a 3 hour timed exam, right?
Yeah.
And then you flash forward a few months to I'd already experienced what it was like to not get the grades that I wanted, and I
Mhm.
realized, wait a minute, we're good here.
Yeah, you're gonna be all
I had a
right.
summer
Yeah.
job,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I had a 1L opportunity that I was excited about where I could have, gone after the fact. And so I was like, it's just not that serious, right? Like
Mhm.
it's still serious, but it's not like it's not gonna, I'm not gonna, you know, have this weight actually make a difference in my life relative to something like speaking
Yeah.
at my funeral, watching her die over 2 years, right? You just kind of like, it took me out of that crippling, this is so important, and if you screw it up, you're done for. I just kind of let go and was like, whatever happens, I just don't even care. I'm
Yeah.
fine. It's going to be okay. I'm going to be a graduate of Harvard Law School. Even if I'm, bottom of the class, guess what? I'm still going to have lots of
Yep.
jobs
Yep.
available. It's fine. And then that kind of relaxation mode allowed me to then actually apply what I knew well, which was the subject matter of those law school exams. And, it's not like I knocked it out of the park on every single one, but there were a couple I was damn proud of. And,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
remember our crim law exam, we didn't, you know, the previous exams, because we have access to the previous exams, or we used to at least at school, they were very gentle. And then all of a sudden in my year, my professor decided to give us a whirlwind. It was about the opioid crisis and a pill pushing conspiracy with a bunch of different criminal doctor defendants.
Wow.
And nobody typed for 20 minutes. Like I kid you not. Like I was shocked when we all opened that up and we're like, what is going on here?
Yep.
Because I just didn't care and I was like, oh, I know this, that makes sense. I'm gonna put that there. That was one of the classes I did the best in. And then
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's that ability to just be like, it's not that serious, it's gonna be fine, do your best, and the rest will be okay, I think is what, you know, really helped me succeed based
Yeah.
on what my aunt gave me.
It's awesome. So, um, going back to Morgan and Morgan. So, like, just tell us, like, what states are you currently recruiting? Are you recruiting everywhere? Like,
Yes.
where's Aaron
Yeah.
going? Like, do you focus on like certain geographic locations or what?
I recruit all over the country. We are constantly growing in so many different places at the same
Okay.
time. One minute I'm on the phone with our managing partner of New York City because I'm prepping, him for my recent conversation with the candidate for premises liability. Then 2 hours later, I'm on the phone with our managing partner of Detroit because we just launched there and we're going massive. The billboards are everywhere. Like we need, several
Wow.
attorneys in the next, X months, right? And then the 2 hours after that, I'm dealing with California on the West Coast
Wow.
for catastrophic auto and for prem. And then we have our specialty groups. The complex litigation group is, I shouldn't say specialty, that's not a term that we use. It's the complex litigation
Yep.
department.
Yep.
And so, for example, the following day I could be talking to a junior attorney who's going to join our class action team, right? Like we're currently, suing Google along with co-counsel David Boyce himself, actually, of Boyce, Schiller, and Flexner, and Sussman Godfrey for data privacy concerns that, that's all public record. You can look at the complaint if
Sure.
you want to see the details. But my point is it varies dramatically, geographically, level of talent. I have hired over, I think, 100 people to this firm at this point, or perhaps just about that, nearing it. And
Wow.
no hire is the same.
So,
It's
so
different.
where are you in the hiring process? Like, do you recruit? Do you have to present somebody to the managing partner?
Yeah, I do all phases, right? So everything from outreach or receipt of the direct application or the referral to connecting with the candidate, getting a sense of their aspirations, figuring out if and evaluating if they're a prospectively good fit for the firm,
Right.
connecting with the managing partners and or other attorneys in a specific office to facilitate the interviews. I will draft the offer letter. I will, call the candidate to let them know they've received the offer. Kind of like, I get to relive that moment of
Yeah, that's
in a
awesome.
different way of getting that admissions call from HLS, right? So every part of the process I'm a part of.
It's amazing. And I could tell that you're really passionate about Morgan and Morgan and working for them and like the position that you have. And that's awesome, man. Congrats on your
Oh,
success there. Wicked cool. Did we leave anything out that you wanted to touch on?
I don't think so. I mean, this has been amazing. I really, really appreciate your having me on here and
Of course.
really digging in with me. And
Yeah.
hopefully, I, answered your questions in a way that will be enjoyable for people to listen to. And other than that, I just want to say thank you again. And also, if there's any talented trial attorneys out there listening, please do not hesitate to seek me out. You can text me directly, 732-539-2742. I love what I do and I would be happy to chat with you, but otherwise, no, thank you so much. And this has been
Awesome.
awesome. Really
Yeah,
great.
I'll definitely keep an open eye too. But Aaron Zimmerman, thank you so much. Senior Director of Attorney Talent Acquisition at Morgan and Morgan. Stay right there, everybody else. Thanks for tuning in wherever you are in the world today. Enjoy yourself.